Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Danny Cannell. That's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson. Lots to get to here on a Monday. Thanks to all of you that are hanging out as we come to you live at youtube.com/Cover3. A few of our thoughts, takeaways, highlights, shout outs from the bowl action so far. We've already got 8 games in the book. And as we're coming to you live, yes, this is not exactly a Myrtle Beach Bowl watch party, but dang it, if something awesome happens, I think it's going to be impossible for us not to at least acknowledge or react to it. Also, some news within the transfer portal and some of your questions. And this is where I want to address not just the live audience, but also those of you who are taking us in later on whatever platform you got. It is time for us to pay more respect to the big old bag of mail. We've been disrespectful to that big old bag of mail, which means we want you to fill it up. Best way to leave us a mailbag question is leave us a 5-star review. Include that mailbag question in the review. We will add it to a future mailbag episode, of which we will certainly be including more in the calendar once we get through the end of bowl season. So fill it up, all your off-season questions. Now's the time to get into it. Let's go ahead and start with, we were discussing your Boca Raton Bowl visit. Danny, you got to be there in person. You got to see a piece of college football history as Western Kentucky quarterback Bailey Zappe breaks not only B.J. Simon's single-season passing yards record, which had stood for nearly 2 decades back at Texas Tech. He also breaks the Joe Burrow single-season passing touchdowns record. So a phenomenal day. And, oh, yeah, by the way, the Hilltoppers won and kind of thumped App State, too, along the way. So big season for Tyson Helton, big season for Bailey Zappe, Jareth Stearns. I mean, everybody that came over as part of that influx of Houston Baptist offense. What'd you think seeing the man up close in person?
It was fun, man. It was a fun game. It was hot. It was really hot. It was 82 degrees at kickoff. And the announcer comes on and said, "Welcome to Boca Raton, where it's 82 degrees. We are the warmest place in the country at this moment." And it was baking a little bit. I was a little bit worried about the guys, but it was also breezy, as I texted you guys before kickoff. Didn't impact our guy Bailey Zappe, though. He was spinning it. And this has been a pretty good bowl for quarterbacks. Dylan Gabriel versus Zach Wilson the year before. Chase Bryce versus Bailey Zappe. One of those sides had a pretty good game. And, this offense is fun. It's fun to watch. They stretch the field vertically, and the ball comes off his hand like really nice. I was really impressed, as I've been all season long. But you see somebody in person, it's a little bit different. So, yeah, I actually got to go down the sideline, watch a few from down there. So it was definitely impressive. And when Burrow threw 60 a couple years ago, I didn't think we'd see it pass this quick. He had a couple playoff games, an SEC championship game. I just didn't think it would get surpassed this quickly. And yet here we are just a couple years later. Now it's a different system. They absolutely own it. They're like, we're just going to throw it. I mean, there was, the first or second touchdown. They're on the 1. And
just throwing little shorts.
Yeah, little side at, just throw it tight to see if he walks it in. They own it, and Tyson Helton admitted it. We're gonna, I think I told you guys on the Locks pod, he was gonna go after it, and sure enough, they got it. So it was a fun game to watch, though, and a great way to spend Saturday, just as a fan, just watching college football, not having to work, just watching it was pretty cool.
I do think it's good that the record for has gone back to a group of 5 smaller school, because I've always felt like growing up, that's where all the passing records took place. It's like
why Houston?
Yeah, the fact Joe Burrow was able to do it at LSU in the SEC is what's truly remarkable about that season. But yeah, all the passing records have always been like with David Klingler at Houston when they were, and Andre Ware when they would be running the run and shoot before anybody else was running it. And now with an air raid team where you throw it 100 times, that guy should have the touchdown record.
Yeah, we want 9 and 5 teams, not national champions.
Yeah, the national champions have enough. All right.
Yes. Do you think that? And this was I wrote something. I had the duties for it for CBSSports.com, and I was trying to put something together where I was like, okay. We don't always necessarily remember the records as being one of the best single season passing performances, or the individuals as necessarily being, a piece of the college football lore. In fact, it's more like you're part of the college football trivia. And BJ Simon's probably more than Joe Burrow, considering Joe Burrow's got the Heisman Trophy and some more recency. Do you think that this performance, combined with some of the extra storylines that we have been telling to you, the Cover 3 viewers and listeners, do you think that Bailey Zappe is going to be kind of a piece of college football history this season that we'll remember it? Or do you think it becomes more of a trivia item over time?
I'll remember it. No, it'll probably be trivia more than anything. I mean, that's the thing. That's part of the fun of college football are these records. Like, that's how I remember who David Klingler is to this day, was for the records he set when he was at Houston, or, like Timmy Chang at Hawaii, those kind of things. You remember who they are. But I think for the casual, it'll probably be forgotten to history.
Yeah, I think so too. It'll be a trivia question, unless he goes on and tears it up in the NFL. But like the guys Tom just mentioned, they usually don't. I had there's a guy that works with CBS New York, and he's a researcher, and he was in my ear constantly, like, get Bailey Zappe to New York, get into the Heisman. I'm like, you lost too many games. Like, if they're undefeated or they were part of a championship run like Burrow, you tend to be remembered a little bit more. And again, like, if it wasn't the Boca Bowl, if it was the New Year's Six Bowl, might have been remembered a little bit differently. But ultimately, I think it'll probably be just a trivia question, and it'll probably be a record that probably gets passed.
Yeah.
Again, it'll probably be another couple years, and we'll be sitting here again talking about the next guy who breaks the record.
I didn't want to take any of his shine, but I think the person who might benefit, but Western Kentucky benefits from this. Tyson Helton benefits from this. This falls in line with the Brandon Doughty 5,000 passing yard season. If the casuals, if the normies, if they look at a Western Kentucky team and all they think about is huge numbers of passing yards and passing touchdowns, that's good for recruiting. That's good for Western Kentucky in general. I feel like if we're going to talk about long-lasting impact, it's great for Tyson Helton and great for Western Kentucky to be able to point to that and be like, look, this is what you can do. And you're right, Danny, if he does go on to be successful at the next level, that's only going to add to us knowing and talking about these records that were broken. Any other highlights or just individual shout outs that you want to have from the first 8 games of action so far in the bowl season?
We talked about it a little bit on Bowl's preseason or preview daily. Shout out to Utah State and Blake Anderson for finishing the job and finishing the year with a win over a Power 5 team. Just was one of the better stories of the season. And also, like I said, shout out to Laura Rutledge, who is the number 1 sideline reporter so far in bowl season for just her LA Bowl performance. Just outstanding.
What about you, DK?
I do think we're already seeing a wild game here in the middle. It's 14-7.
Mm-hmm.
It's still the first quarter. I do think, and I was texting you guys from the game, I do think it looks like there's a lot of defenders who are like, just get me to the offseason healthy.
Yes.
Let's just put this guy down. Let's not go for the kill shot, which, trust me, I am totally okay with. That's been kind of my takeaway. I don't know the record. And remember, I leaned that way in our discussion, but then I picked a lot of unders in our picks. But I was like, that's probably going to be the trend of what you'll see. I just think, there's a lot of guys nowadays that just don't want to get hurt in their bowl game.
Yeah, we had UAB BYU snuck over. Obviously, Coastal and Northern blasted it. Maybe Middle Toledo that finished at 55. That might have been
an over.
That was another over.
Yeah.
Louisiana Marshall hit 57. Obviously, an over in the Boca Bowl. Yeah, I think it might just be LA Bowl.
I think that's the only under so far. Yeah.
So my big takeaway was, how about this? Underdogs are 6-2 against the spread so far, but not just even covering the spread. 4 outright winners. That would, of course, be Middle Tennessee. Congratulations to Jordan. Western Kentucky, UAB, and Utah State all getting it done on the field. Only Louisiana and Liberty have covered as favorites.
And Liberty covered the hell that spread as favorites, because that was just a waxing.
56-20, and it was a never in doubt 56-20. The game was 33-10 at halftime.
Yeah, it was like we talked about, like one team has an NFL QB and the other one didn't, and it was obvious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is some transfer portal news is amazing when we perfectly predict great landing spots for players, and then they listen to the Cover 3 podcast and then just go and follow the free advice. So Bo Nix, we will be in touch. If you want to do an NIL deal for next season with Oregon, we can send you a mug. We can send you an engraved mug, and you can take pictures of it on your IG. So Bo Nix announces his intention to transfer to Oregon. I think that without recycling some of the same ideas, while we thought him taking a quarterback spot in the Pac-12, taking a quarterback spot in another conference beyond the SEC, I think that those all seem like reasonable takes to be able to continue here. But with the news official, what really stands out to you about Bo Nix's move?
It makes sense. That's why we were predicting it would happen. I feel like Oregon fans might not be as thrilled by it because a lot of Oregon fans were complaining about that offense this year with Anthony Brown. And there are a lot of similarities between Anthony Brown's game and Bo Nix's game, although I do think Bo Nix is a better passer. I also think that just getting out of the SEC will be good for him because I feel like we've got plenty of data to suggest that Bo Nix is a good quarterback, but he's not good enough to win you the SEC West. He's not good enough to win you the SEC. And now I think that going to the Pac-12, where he's not going to be going up against Alabama, LSU, all these teams, Texas A&M every single week, we might see some better numbers. We might help him improve his draft stock, and it could be good for Oregon as far as maybe not only winning that division, but winning that conference and going up against a USC team that certainly seems pretty revitalized by Lincoln Riley already, judging by the way that they're recruiting on the trail at this point. So I think this is something that could work out pretty well for both sides.
I kind of want to give it a C+. Like that's why I look at it, because I think it might work, but at the same time, it's still Bo Nix, who was incredibly up and down. But I think this is a lot about, this is a positive thing from a player who's tough, who's a good worker, who's going to be a good leader. I think he'll bring a great energy. And I don't know the health of that locker room, but I feel like Bo Nix is a good kid, like a good football player from the locker room perspective. If he could eliminate his mistakes, and because he had these stretches where he was pretty good, and it was like, oh, maybe he's turned the corner, and then you have a setback, and most of the time was against a really good team, a really good defense, which is understandable. So maybe if he gets on a run, he could be that quarterback they're looking for. I think it's going to be interesting because I wonder if he shows up on some Heisman lists, just because he's Bo Nix, new uniform. Oregon will probably be a top 25 team. Like, I don't know. I'm not ready to go that far. But if you watch what Dillingham did at Florida State with Jordan Travis, like when Mackenzie Milton and they were rotating quarterbacks, once they stopped doing that and it was just Jordan Travis's team, Jordan Travis actually played really well. And they designed, like at one time he had thrown for 10 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he had rushed for another 7 touchdowns. You're like 17 touchdowns to 1 interception on a very, on a Florida State team that wasn't very good. And that's developing a quarterback. Like they maximized Jordan Travis. So I think they're going to want to do some of the same concepts. I think he's going to take some of that style, that system with him to Oregon, to Eugene. And I think Bo Nix might fit pretty well in that system. So I said C+, like, because I think we're going to get into this. Oh, is this a home run? And there's going to be some guys who don't even start, like who don't even win the job. Like, I also think this is really interesting. What does this mean for Oregon's quarterback room? Like, what does a Ty Thompson do? But yet, if he couldn't breed out Anthony Brown, maybe he was overhyped or maybe he wasn't ready. You just don't know until kind of you see a spring competition. So I like it. I think it's exciting for him. I think you're right. I think it's best to him to get out of the SEC, kind of get some fresh life in him and see what happens.
Yeah. And another thing that you got to consider too, like you mentioned, the Bo Nix moments, like the crazy dumb things that he sometimes does, which also sometimes turn out to be amazing, brilliant things like that touchdown against LSU. But I think if you watch Bo Nix closely, most of those dumb moments came when he was under pressure. Yeah. And at Auburn, he was playing behind one of the worst offensive lines in the SEC, going up against SEC defensive linemen. At Oregon, he's probably going to be playing behind the best offensive line in the country, going up against defensive lines that are good, but not quite to the same level that he's been facing. So we might be able to see a more refined, more patient, more not just, playing by the seat of his pants, Bo Nix.
Kenny Dillingham the offensive coordinator at Oregon, was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Auburn for Bo Nix's freshman season, a freshman season that started with Bo Nix doing crazy Bo Nix stuff and beating Oregon. Incredible. But
it might have been, statistically, might have been his best year.
It also seems to fall in line with like the Spencer Rattler South Carolina transfer. Like, who knows you better than the coach that was right there with you at your old school? You know, Shane Beamer saying like, okay, I understand that Spencer's got this bad rap, but I've been with this guy. I've been with him behind the scenes. I think I can know how to bring the best out of him. Same thing for Kenny Dillingham. He's going to Dan Lanning and he's saying, look, I worked with this guy when he was a freshman. I understand, you know, what his strengths and weaknesses are. I think I can be able to bring him in and have him really help our football team. You know, sometimes it's great to, not great to know, but always good to remember that those relationships never stop. And that being able to maintain those relationships is just another piece of the, you know, the college football coaches moving, players moving. It can come together in a way that could be very fruitful. And I'm sure that Oregon fans, and I guess South Carolina fans as well, if we're going to follow that same narrative, are hoping that their former assistants are going to be able to maximize what those quarterbacks can do.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why smart coaching staffs right now, like you'll see some schools recruiting a kid out of high school that's, you know, like a 4-star, and maybe they're like a 5-win, 6-win team, and they're going up against, you know, like the Alabamas of the world, and they really don't have a chance to get them, but they keep recruiting them because in this transfer portal age, that kid goes to Alabama next year, a year or two from now, he might not be staring up at that depth chart feeling great and be entering that portal. So it's important to establish those relationships because, like you said, most of these transfers end up being, you know, like these kids don't have the same amount of time that they did in high school to be re-recruited all over again. It's generally about pre-existing relationships, and that's part of the reason why it's sometimes easy to predict where a transfer is going to end up ahead of time.
That has changed dramatically because it didn't happen to me, but I had several teammates who had stories of coaches who chewed them out. You know, you dumb believe the biggest mistake of your life because, you know, you told them you're not going to X, you're not going to this school, and they just got chewed out. You can't do that today because you might be like you're saying, Tom. You're probably like, best of luck, buddy. You know, I hope you go crush it. Then you text them a month in, hey, just thinking about you. It's like, I mean, it is absolutely the recruiting process never stops.
Never stops.
Even if they're not on your team.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's like we could complain about how much coaches are getting paid right now, but man, it's a 24/7 job.
Unbelievable. Coming up on the other side, we are going to open up the big old bag of mail, including a suggestion for postseason eligibility. We'll get into that and more next. All right, into the big old bag of mail. This question is from Richland96. And Richland asks, I've never liked the idea of 6-6 teams in a bowl game. 6 wins just doesn't seem good enough for a bowl game. Let's move to a 12-team playoff and give every other team that has won 8 games a bowl game. That will make the postseason much more exciting. What say you?
No.
I like 6-6 teams because you don't bail on the season. And I feel like the 2 teams in the Myrtle Beach Bowl are a good example of that because about 5 or 6 weeks into the season, ODU and Tulsa were dead in the water. And so the fact that you get to get hot at the end of the season, carry that into the postseason, like what that can just mean for your experience as a player or what you're building as the head coach of a program. 6-6 sort of feels right to me.
Yeah, and it's more than anything, like from the competitive standpoint, I understand like a team that only won half its games shouldn't be rewarded. Like, and I get that logic, but it stems from when they used to only play 11 games. So 6 wins used to be a winning record. But more than anything, if you eliminate teams, you know, if you only allow 8-win teams to go to the playoffs, it's a lot fewer bowl games for us to watch. And I like having bowl games to watch because it's literally a Monday afternoon right now. And if, you know, we're watching football because of a bowl game. So yeah, no, any idea that involves fewer bowl games, I'm not going to be in support of.
I totally get what he's saying. I lean towards that side. Like it's supposed to be a reward. It feels like you're giving a trophy to everybody, which I don't like. But to Tom's point, we're watching football on a Monday, like when there wouldn't be anything else on. We had 6 games on Saturday that wouldn't have been on. It would have just been more hype for the playoffs, so we'd have to wait longer. I do like. Would you guys think it would ever work? This would require a massive blow up. Like if you had the first preseason was your bowl weekend, and that was just a kickoff weekend was your exhibition bowl season. So you would have had the Boca Bowl August 23rd, and we would have had the Myrtle Beach Bowl August 23rd, and just had, and maybe it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just bowl weekend, except the bowls are played in the preseason. Then you protect from opt-outs. You protect from guys quitting. It's the only solution that prevents the opt-outs. I just think we're too ingrained historically. And then the true postseason would just be the playoffs.
Mike, what I don't like about that is then the players are at their freshest for an exhibition game.
Well, it would still count kind of like, as far as the playoffs count, like it would just be an extra game.
I think there should be like a happy medium where like we keep the bowl games, but what we do is we kind of take a bowl approach to like that first weekend of the season where, instead of having teams scheduling games a decade in advance, at the end of a season, we could have like the bowl game. We could figure out a system where the bowl games determine who you play in your first game of the next season and like a big non-conference. So it would set up a lot of, pretty big non-conference matchups and just interesting matchups in that first week of the year compared to, we still get some, but we also get a whole lot of, this team versus some FCS team that it's a 50-point favorite against. So I think that could be kind of like an interesting, not necessarily a bowl game, but use the bowl games to determine next year's schedule.
I looked up in years past, because this discussion always comes up, like my senior year at Florida State, I think we had 20 bowls. We've doubled them. And I think everybody was around 8 wins. I would say, there were games stacked up on both networks on Saturday. You had ABC and ESPN. Maybe it would feel a little more special if you had less, but you could still air them. Then we wouldn't have games on Monday. Again, going back to that. I don't know. I get why we have them. And you know what? People watch these. I mean, go look at the ratings for a regular NBA season game. Go look at any other sport that's in their, professional sport. They're not touching college football bowl games. So even though they might feel crappy, they're still making a lot of money for ESPN. So they're going to keep airing them. Yeah.
The tourism angle of this and the idea of the bowl trip with your teammates or your family making the trip. Yeah. I don't think going to Florida in August hits quite the same as going to Florida in December. Yeah. Like one of these is a big selling point. I can understand why you're getting behind it.
The Idaho Potato Bowl, though, would be way more exciting. Like that'd be a better destination spot that time of year.
You get a lot more Midwestern and Northern bowl games in the summer than you would in the winter.
That's true. Yeah. If we want to spread them out a little bit more, I like that. I think that I've heard the bowls in the spring, like replace all spring games with bowl games or some sort of like spring scrimmages. I've heard that suggestion. I don't know if I'm all the way on board with it. I think that let's be honest, bowl season TM has bought me. They've bought me with all of their bowl swag over the years. I'm just carrying water for the bowl industrial complex. But and like to steal a line from our colleague Gary Parrish, who always likes to remind you, the thing about a 68 team tournament is you got to put 68 teams in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about 42 bowl games, listen, if we don't have enough 6-6 teams, we start pulling from smart 5-7 teams with good APR scores. So at least we've got all 6-6 teams, right? Like at least we've got enough to be able to meet what we have right now in terms of our eligibility.
Speaking of the bowl lobby buying support, shout out to the Mayo Bowl.
Nice.
Charlotte Sports Foundation, Duke's Mayo Bowl always brings the heat. We got a personal apology from the executive director of the Duke's Mayo Bowl for accidentally misleading the college football public in last year's game in thinking that there was going to be a Mayo bath.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this year. Did you see they agreed? Both coaches agreed they're going to do a Mayo bath.
And you know what? Mac and Shane are two coaches who I am not surprised to be like, yeah, go for it. I don't care.
Yeah. They know that it'll be great. They
Yeah,
understand about what the viral moment's going to be.
Mhm.
I don't think that college football playoff expansion is going to change the bowl math such that we're going to get a bunch of people in here. If I'm making a prediction, I think every college football playoff game will be a bowl game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not on campus.
That's just a prediction. Like I think that the on-campus aspect of this might be gone. And we just see in the same way that when the 4 BCS bowls reached out and grabbed the cotton and the peach, elevated them, I think that they're going to reach out and grab a few more bowls and save them and pull them up into the new playoff era.
There's an off-season idea for us. We should draft which bowls we think will get playoff, like be selected for playoff in the future.
Got to do one of the like Jacksonville. I mean, you got to tackle Outback. Yeah. Just
or will they just create new bowls? And they all happen to be in NFL stadiums.
Who's pushing hard is Frisco. They got 2, and they took on that extra one.
Yeah, I know. So I'm saying the Frisco Bowl is going to end up being a playoff somehow. Jerry Jones is going to grease the skids. Arkansas is going to be in it every single year.
Hey, they get the most out of that stadium and out of all those hotels. Good job, Frisco Bowl community.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to here we go. This next question comes from Cal. Awesome pod. Thanks for the insight and the entertainment. A couple months ago, you guys went through the Georgia defensive depth chart and decided 9 of them would be NFL players. Could you do the same thing with Ohio State's offense? I think that all 10 or 11 of Ohio State's offensive starters will end up in the NFL. What say us?
It's certainly possible, yes.
I was just going to say, looking at them, the skill positions
are
locks.
Yeah.
And then you go to the offensive line and, I bet they all get at least free agent contracts, I bet they get some sort of opportunity, whether they parlay it into a job or not, or whether they're a practice squad. I would think so. Yeah, I think you would.
So Nicholas Petit-Frere is in. Thayer Munford is in.
Yeah, Thayer Munford will probably be drafted in a couple months.
DeWand Jones.
I think we'll see. I mean, I think he's coming back next year. We'll see. He's definitely got the size and the frame that you look for. I don't know if he's got quite the tape for it yet, but I think that he's somebody who would get in camp for sure. Paris Johnson, I think, will eventually be an NFL player. Luke Weipler, their center, too early to tell. Yeah. I'd say the one person I'm the sketchiest about is tight end Jeremy Ruckert. I think he'll end up. I think he's good. I just don't know if he is. I don't know how. We'll have to see what he does at the combine. Honestly, that's my one I think he's a good football player who won't test well, and I think that kind of hurts your draft stock sometimes.
I think he's got 6th round pick written all over him.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the Jeremy Ruckert size tight ends right now. I mean, you got to have a couple of them in your NFL.
I think he should be on an NFL roster. I just don't know how NFL teams are going to view him at this point.
He was always that toy in that Ohio State offense where
he gets lost.
Yeah, you can overwhelm an opponent with all these splash plays with all these other people, but you get down inside the red zone or you get in a goal-to-go opportunity and look, your linebacker's just not going to stick with him, or he's going to put his body on him, get you in that box out and be able to pull in the touchdown. It feels like, all of those tight ends that have been stacking up. Basically, does it go back to, and I promise this isn't just because the Ravens are hot topic this week, but does it go back to the Mark Andrews?
How so?
I'm thinking about the tight end that can go in line or not, who is going to be, has a big enough body and good enough hands to put a defender on their back when they get into the end zone, coming from a prolific passing offense with an understanding of modern concepts and what to do when the play breaks down. Kind of that kind of player.
I don't know if that's where it started, but I mean, that is definitely kind of to be drafted early. You have to be like Kyle Pitts. You have to basically be a receiver. And then they don't really care if you can block or not. in the first round. I feel like for the other guys, unless you just have that crazy freakish athleticism, yeah, you've got to be able to show the ability to not only be able to run those routes and catch the ball, but you've got to be able to stick in and block. And I do think that's where Ruckert will compare well to some of the other tight ends in this class. And that's the other thing too. I don't think this is a great tight end class overall, which I think would help Ruckert. But again, I just have the feeling like when you get to the combine, maybe he'll blow me away and he'll have better numbers than I expect. It's just, I don't think he's going to have like the 40 or like the crazy, cone drill time and all that kind of stuff that's going to make everybody swoon for him. I think he's just going to be a solid player who you like a lot more when you watch the tape than you do in tights.
He's a guy I think in like 2000 would have been a higher draft pick. But I think the way the game has evolved, where they're looking for a George Kittle or something along those lines, like a Kyle Pitts. They used to be like, 30 years ago, if you couldn't block, it was, like that's going to be a problem. Now it's if you can't create a mismatch with a linebacker, then that's more of a problem. So I think it's just the evolution of the position, so much so that tight ends are trying to count themselves as wide receivers so they get better franchise tags. And they're, proving it production-wise because they're catching as many as, the best wide receivers out there.
Well, you don't have to tell that to me, Danny, because on my fantasy team, I start 3 tight ends at once.
There you go.
Lunatic.
Chip runs Chip's running like 31 personnel in our fantasy league all the time.
Yeah.
I draft no running backs or no wide receivers, waiver wire all season. But if I've got a Pat Mahomes and 3 tight ends, I think I can go and get myself 4 touchdowns on a Sunday.
The Browns might be tight end heavy today.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Browns might be starting at tight end to QB the way things are going.
Wildcat this thing.
Yeah.
All right, let's one more. This one is from Iceman. Iceman says, great show. It is often discussed how Atlanta, Southern California, and Dallas-Fort Worth are recruiting hotbeds because lots of people have moved there in the past 10 to 20 years. Whenever this comes up, I always wonder why New York City and the surrounding towns are not hotbeds, even though they have a larger population than all the places previously mentioned. I'm wondering if you have any insight on why this might be.
It's not just the number of people.
Real estate. Football fields are big.
Yeah, that's part of it. But it's also just football is bigger in those parts of the country than it is in the Northeast. Like New York is obviously the hub of the Northeast, and it is for a lot of, the United States. But like football is just not embedded there the way it is. And part of that is, like you said, Chip, the real estate. There's not football fields everywhere you go because everybody's kind of living on top of each other, which makes it easier to get a basketball court in the middle of a concrete jungle than a football field. But it's also just culturally, like, football is always been popular in certain regions of the country, and it still is. Whereas in New York, there's a bunch of, it's, the quote unquote melting pot. There's probably more soccer fans in New York than there are football fans. And being, just it's not the most popular sport in the city. Therefore, kids aren't growing up and playing it the way that they are in other areas of the country.
Giants legend Danny Cannell.
Yeah, but I think I hear that point. I would agree with that. But the NFL is still popular. Like the Giants and Jets are still popular in New York City. But I get it's always the Mecca. Like we talk about the Mecca, even though the Knicks haven't been any good. But there's been Rucker, the basketball courts there in the city that have been always produced. That absolutely has to do with it though, because there's a passion for football in the South and Texas and in California from a very young age that just doesn't exist. Maybe it's space in the city, but out in the boroughs, it's probably cost because it's expensive.
Yeah.
Like you get out in Queens or you get out in some of these other places, it's expensive to get pads and to load up and travel different places. So I was trying to think about that. It is surprising, but I think there's probably a bunch of different reasons why you don't see it as a hotbed of talent.
Yeah, and it's like if you look at it this way, like northern New Jersey is pretty much suburban New York.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the football talent in that area comes from northern New Jersey. So there is the interest. It's just in the suburbs. It's not so much in the city, and we don't consider it New York talent. But in reality, a lot of those kids from New Jersey, you could consider New York talent.
Right, because their parents probably work in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
a good point.
Is there something about in the South or in the Midwest, and I really cannot speak just from my own experience to Southern California or California in general, because I'm not sure, but I think about high school football specifically just being so much more tied to like local communities and being at the center of like where everything is. Like there are high schools that were playing for the North Carolina State Championship just last weekend, and I remember there was, I think it was the 2A game, but it's just a like classic story of two high schools where in that town, in that county on Friday night, everybody's going to the game. Like it truly is like a unifying factor. And in the New York metro area, there's just so much going on that I don't know if like a high school football program would be able to hold that kind of attention and support when you've got a lot of other places for that to be spent.
I also think that it's professional sports and the prevalence of them in the areas, because like the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, when they first came into existence, all their franchises were located on the East Coast and the Northeast, and then some, you kind of gradually spread out to the Midwest as the population did. And the South and a lot of the West weren't really served with professional sports teams in those leagues. So that's why their college teams became a bigger deal down there, because they were their local teams. And then we haven't really seen until the recent last 50 years with expansion in pro sports, them moving into the Southeast, them moving into Texas, them moving out further west and into the Pacific Northwest. And I think that has to play a role too. Like if you grew up in New York, you've got, the Knicks, the Giants, the Jets. Now you've got the Nets. You've got,
hockey.
You've got the Rangers, the Islanders. You've got 1,000 choices. Like college sports are not going to be as prevalent to you. And also, like the local media there, what are they? They're not talking about Rutgers football. They're talking about the Jets. They're talking about the Giants. It's just not as big of a deal.
And you can always sniff out when all the content decisions in sports are being made by somebody from New York City.
Yes.
Boy, my college football segments will get cut. Oh man. Remember, if you want to jump in on a future mailbag episode, you can do it by leaving us a 5-star review and put your question within that review. You can follow him on Twitter at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Tom Fernella. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. We will be back on Thursday for our next group of bowl locks, 11 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday for the next round of bowl locks. We will take you through the following week, which will be through December 30th. So again, Thursday, 11 a.m., we'll be back live for the next round of bowl locks. On the audio form, Bowl Season Daily continues to roll on, getting you set with 10 to 15 minutes of bowl breakdowns for that day every single morning. Subscribe so you don't even have to go hunt for it. It's delivered right to you. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See ya.